Jazzcast Pros.
What are the things that are actually stopping you from prospecting? Why are you not having as many conversations as you'd like to create the sales that you know you can have? In today's chat, I'm going to be going through the 5 conversations you're having that are stopping you from prospecting and how we can change those conversations around so that you are filling the funnel and maximizing your impact and your income. Welcome to High Vibe Table Talks, the podcast to help you, the current or aspiring solopreneur, navigate the messy middle so you can make both an income and an impact. Hi, I'm Rashawn, and I love creating safe spaces for women to be courageous in their dreams. After spending a decade working in sales for a startup and talking with hundreds of other women entrepreneurs, I know it can be lonely, but you can do this. We are having impactful conversations with people walking similar paths to you, so pull up a seat. This is High Vibe Table Talks. One thing that we do in my co-working groups quite often is name the voices we hear in our head. And that might sound a little silly, but this is life. Let's have a little fun with it. But what we do is there are so many voices that go on inside of our head, and I like to relate it a lot to the movie Inside Out. If you haven't seen Inside Out, definitely go watch it. I'm actually really excited to see Inside Out too. Could not see it in theaters as someone who has recently been diagnosed with anxiety and ADHD, and I'm still processing that. I think seeing a movie about anxiety would have left me a mess in the theater. But anyways, I like taking the voices that we hear in our head and giving them names, just like they do in Inside Out. So if you haven't seen the movie Inside Out, it's this girl, she's 10 or 11, and they have all the characters. Amy Poehler plays Joy, Louis Black plays Anger, and so you see inside of her mind as she's going through big life changes. And this happens to us in business, and I think one of the hardest parts and why entrepreneurship can feel so lonely is because when we have those voices and they come up, it's hard for us to identify them, or we try to pretend they don't exist, or, believe them more than we should. So when we're in the co-working group, there's sometimes where someone's like, oh, but I don't know, and da-da-da. And it's like, okay, let's talk to that voice that's going on inside your head right now because it's not kind, helpful, or true. And so we come up with names for them and then we talk to them. And it's not about being like, how dare that voice ever come inside of my head? It's, I hear you. I understand where you're coming from. Thank you. We're going to take this action anyways. So what we're going to be discussing today are the 5 voices that stop you from prospecting. As you may or may not know, I recently launched a prospecting course. It's called Sales Prospecting Simplified. I think that learning how to prospect and actually going through with the actions of prospecting will transform your business. There's a lot of sales content out there, but this course really hones in and puts a spotlight on the prospecting piece of it, because you can't get good at negotiating, closing, pitching, onboarding until you start to have more conversations, which happens in the prospecting phase. And so I was thinking about the prospecting phase and what stops people from doing it. And so I thought through the top 5 reasons why people don't prospect, and then I put some names to them and what types of conversations they may be having inside of your head that may be stopping you from doing it. Because I think that the first piece of it is awareness, just becoming aware of the voices that are going on inside of your head, aware of the conversations that you're having, and then you can bring intention to them, because prospecting is scary. You're opening yourself up for rejection. You're opening yourself up to being very vulnerable. And so it's normal that these voices come up, and it's our job as entrepreneurs. Amanda Francis says sales is a commitment to your calling. And so really stepping back and saying, why do I think this is important? And let's take action on it, even though those emotions are real. Okay. So we're going to get into the 5 voices that you hear that are stopping you from prospecting. Number 1, is fearful Frank. And this one is probably the most like basic and raw emotion. And fearful Frank is, what if they hate me? What if they don't like it? What if they say no? What if they're mad at me because I'm cold calling them in the middle of their day? There is a lot of natural fear that comes up when prospecting. Again, very normal, very raw. And I think it's an emotion we can identify very easily. And so fearful Frank comes in, and when you're about to prospect and bombards you with all of the I think fearful Frank really catastrophizes. And that's one of my favorite words, even though it's like a terrible word. It's the opposite of my other favorite word, which is terrified and excited. But fearful Frank really catastrophizes. And I think this comes from our genetically we're built because for a long time, if you didn't follow community, you were ostracized from your group. Like back when we were hunters and gatherers, then you would starve, you would die. And so our brain is wired to catastrophize to if you go outside the norm, you will die. Even on my co-working session last week, I was telling them that I hit the submit button and I published my sales course, and I was so overwhelmed by oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. Holy smokes. And so someone was like, but did you die? And we won't die. When we hear no, when we put our stuff out there, whether people love it, hate it, don't care about it at all, we didn't die. And that's the thing. Sometimes it's we're so afraid to put our stuff out there because we're so fearful. Thank you, fearful Frank. And then it's oh, okay, we didn't die. And so I just like to say to fearful Frank, thank you. I hear you. It is scary. Your emotion is valid, and I'm going to take action anyways. So emotion number 1 is fearful Frank. Emotion number 2 is avoidance Annie. Sometimes when we talk ourselves down from one emotion, it likes to have a quick wardrobe change and show up as something else. And so sometimes it's avoidance Annie, oh, that thing makes me really uncomfortable. And so I'm going to find all of these tasks that I'm going to put a higher level of importance than actually is on them. Because, oh my gosh, this work really needs to get done. And so this other thing, which is prospecting, that makes me very uncomfortable, is not as important as making sure I respond back to my emails right away. Even though if I respond to them in 90 minutes after I've done my prospecting power hour, it will be perfectly okay. There is no deadline. That's just my brain being this is really scary, so I'm going to do something that isn't scary. And so avoidance Annie just likes to find other ways to do things that are more comfortable than prospecting. This was actually kind of how I started High Vibe Cowork. When I was doing prospecting at my highest level, I was making about 250 cold calls per week. And when I got up to that point, it was all of 2019 I did that, and 2020. And in obviously March of 2020, I was initially furloughed, but then when I came back, we were all working from home. My sales territory was 10 states. So I was cold calling from an office in Rochester, but I was calling car dealerships all over the East Coast and into Ohio, Michigan, Indiana. So I was doing it from home. And some of you, those who are closest to me, know that sometimes I struggle with household chores. My sink is not empty right now. I actually washed and dried an entire load of laundry in one day without letting it sit in the washing machine over the weekend. Please clap. But anyways, I was choosing to do dishes over cold calling in April, May, June of 2020. And I wasn't showing up to the prospecting the way that I had been in the office and the way that I knew that I should be. And so that is what kind of prompted me to open my first accountability Zoom. I put it out to my network, said, hey, if you'd like, I'm going to show up on Monday. We're going to talk about what we want to do for the week. And on Friday, we're going to talk about how did we do, what lessons did we learn, and we're going to celebrate. And so 250 cold calls, that was like one of my top priorities every week. And I started to get back to my numbers because I had that built-in accountability. So Avoidance Annie is very much like, those dishes, if they sit in that sink for another hour, I'm going to have to throw them all away. Again, catastrophizing. Or, remember what I did put that load of laundry and I really need to move that over. Or I guess my dog does need to go out again. That was a very specific scenario for me, avoiding and diverting to tasks that are around me. And you can still avoid things when you're in an office or at a co-working space or any of the areas in which you work, but your brain will naturally do something that is more comfortable, that is not prospecting. Again, I think all of these go back to, it's like fear had a wardrobe change and shows up as something else because it's pushing us outside of our comfort zone. And that is at the heart of sales. I was listening to Jeffrey Gitmer, who is a sales expert, and I've listened to him for a long time. And I can't remember exactly how he says it, but like he's something along the lines of like, if you're not okay being uncomfortable in sales, then you need to go get a job at the post office because like people come there wanting to buy stamps. And so there is a level of discomfort that comes along with sales. But again, I will go back to sales as a commitment to your calling. If you don't sell, you don't have a business. And really, I think one of the tips I would give you if you're having these conversations with Fearful Frank, Avoidance Annie is go back to your why. Why are you doing this? Why are you going through this discomfort? What is at your core of why you're pushing yourself through your comforts outside of your comfort zone? Conversation number 3 is with Perfectionism Penelope. This, again, is another frequent one that we tend to lean into because I think that a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, they are go-getters, they have certain levels of like type A personality in them. And it's like, if I just learn this, if I just do this, if I just get it perfect, I think we like to think in our heads, like if I have the perfect course, if I have the perfect landing page, if I have the perfect script, then everybody will buy. I will never face rejection if everything is perfect. And let me tell you, that is bullshit. That is your brain, again, trying to keep you safe and small. So we're going to say, Perfectionism Penelope, I appreciate you. And I understand that, again, rejection is scary. But even the most perfect orange, there's going to be people out there who don't like oranges. If you're trying to be for everybody, you're going to be for nobody. And no one is going to get out there and sell their thing, whatever it is, completely unscathed. So no matter how perfect your landing page, your script, your course, whatever it is, looks like, you still have to get it out there. And here's the other piece of that. You don't know what perfect is. You don't know what the just right thing is until you get it out there, until you really start selling and having those conversations. So you thinking like, if I just either educate myself more, spend more time on it, tweak it, then it'll be perfect. And then you start getting it out there. And, one of the things that I'm working through right now and talking about sales is I think I am most impactful in helping solopreneurs sell. And in conversations I've had with my dad, he's like, I think there's a lot of people out there who don't consider themselves entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. They maybe don't identify with that as a word. And so you're trying to sell to them, but they don't identify with that as who they are yet, even though your course really could help them. And so we just are talking about the verbiage. And so I don't know what the answer to that is until I start to have conversations, until I start to put it out there. And he doesn't know my audience as well as I do. I think a lot of my audience does identify with that, but I may be wrong. So I'm putting some stuff out there and I'm going to see, does my audience identify with that? And that's part of why there is a science to sales, because you start to put stuff out there and gather back the data and say, is this actually true? Does it align with what I thought was going to drum up business? And so perfectionism Penelope is saying, well, it has to be perfect before I put it out there, but there is no such thing as perfect, obviously, but you don't know what's going to work until you really start to put yourself out there. And so what I like to exchange perfectionism with is curiosity. Curiosity kind of like sheds a lot of the shame that comes along with these conversations, with all of these kind of conversations we're talking about today, and saying, I like to say I'm in my Thomas Edison era. I'm figuring out what does work. I'm figuring out what doesn't work. I'm going to figure out a lot of things that don't work. I really thought that I could create groups around real estate agents kind of in different areas coming together and figuring out what helped. And none of the conversations I had with real estate agents led to any business. So that was I learned a lot during that quarter. And no matter how perfect my landing page, no matter how perfect my script, that just wasn't the audience for what I was offering. And now we know. And it says nothing about me as a business owner or what I was offering. It just wasn't a good fit. And I didn't know that until I started to put myself out there. Conversation number 4, self-sabotaging Sally. These are the conversations when you start to hear, this is so dumb. No one will buy this. Who do I think I was to try to put out there this sales course for me? Like last week when I put my sales course out to my email list, I'm like, okay, I have like not a huge number of people on my email list, but like chances are someone will buy after I put this out to my email list. And I, in full transparency, sold 0 to my email list last week. No one bought. And I went into self-sabotaging Sally mode for sure. This is so dumb. Who do I think I am? Like, why did I do this? Like all of the things, the fear that comes up around the pivot were all like reaffirmed with that. And if it were one of my clients and they said this, I'm like, okay, so you put something out to someone one time and you're shocked they didn't buy? Like, of course, that's not how sales works. I know that about the numbers, but that is a natural reaction when you hear nothing back, is like we really make it about ourselves when it has nothing to do with ourselves. So self-sabotaging Sally really swoops in, and when we don't get the reaction we hope out of the first run, first conversation, any of those, it can be like, well, you're the worst. Who do you think you are? And that is so normal. But as I said before, like you have to get whatever it is you're offering out to people multiple times before most people will buy. The nice thing about the email list is I can see how many people clicked, what link they clicked on, different data like that, which was really interesting. And so maybe it is the fact that they don't identify with the word solopreneur, or maybe it is a pricing issue, or maybe it is a timing issue, or whatever, like, again, I'm being very curious about what parts of it were good or not good, but I'm not going to be like, well, sent my email out and no one bought. Let's burn this to the ground. So I appreciate you, self-sabotaging Sally, because you don't want me to feel that feeling again. And I still feel the need to get this course out to more people. So I'm going to continue to prospect. Conversation number 5 is exaggerating Edgar. And exaggerating Edgar is when we don't know our numbers. as I said before, when I was cold calling about 250 people a week. I was having about 10 conversations that would lead to about 4 meetings, and I was closing 1 to 2 of those people. And so I knew that those were the numbers I needed to hit to get the results I wanted. When I first started, I was like, oh my God, I'm cold calling all day. And if someone asked me like, okay, how many people are you cold calling? I'm like, a million. That's all I do all day, just cold call people. And then when I really look at the numbers, I was cold calling like 10 a day. So I was hitting maybe like 50 a week. And that's all I was doing. And so when we're doing something, and I have heard this is another trap that neurodiverse brains fall into. It's just like all or nothing, or like, I have to do the dishes. It's going to take me like an hour. And when you really sit down and track it, it took 20 minutes. And so then it's like not that big of a deal. And so really tracking your data is going to be really important in this because, again, our brain is catastrophizing and saying, this really uncomfortable thing, it took me so long and I really didn't like it. And I was like, nope. All right. Let's shrink it down and say, what did you actually do? And that is, in my sales course, one of the things that you have access to are prospecting power hours. And I truly believe in the power of prospecting power hours because it helps you say, okay, I'm going to fit this very uncomfortable thing into this finite amount of time. And I'm going to make sure I track it so I know how many. And it's this very like intentional and a bit more intense piece of time, which gives you so much freedom back. If you are prospecting, so I'm in the course, you get 4 hours of prospecting power hours per week with me and my community. So if you add those 4 hours to your business and what you're doing currently, I do think you will see a difference. And so it's not a huge amount of time. Like if you're adding sales to your business, I'm not saying that you now 20 hours a week now need to have that sales hat on, or 30 hours a week or whatever you're exaggerating. Edgar may think if I want to make sales, then all of a sudden I need to be selling all the time. I do think there's a place for that. Being in launch mode right now, I am heavier into the sales side of my business. And when I was purely just selling for the other company, obviously sales was a top focus, but prospecting was taking me, even when I was purely just in sales, between 10 and 12 hours a week was all I was prospecting. And it gives you so much freedom back. And so now, yes, it's not the most exciting piece of our week, but it is hugely impactful. And the creative, impactful, important, intense work that you get to do, again, go back to your why are you doing this, can only happen if I put in those 4 hours a week of prospecting intensely and efficiently. And so those are the 5 conversations that are stopping you from prospecting. Again, to wrap it up, it is Fearful Frank, what if they hate me? Avoidance Annie, I have all of these other really urgent tasks I'm going to take care of before I start prospecting. Perfectionism Penelope, my script, landing page, course, whatever has to be perfect before I can put it out there. Self-sabotaging Sally, this is so dumb, I am the worst, and exaggerating Edgar. I cold called forever today and no one bought. Again, if I can give you one tip to kind of combat those conversations, those voices, remember your why. Why are you doing this? Why do you feel so passionate about this business and this work? Selling is a commitment to your calling. And if you don't sell, you don't have a business. And yeah, if you want to learn more about the sales course, I would love to have you. I think it's going to be really incredible. And I will put the link in the show notes. Please leave a review. Those are always so helpful on whatever platform you listen to this. Until next time, remember that big dreams and small steps will transform your life.